Hey folks, BlackCross here, and welcome to another video in which we're going to be talking about some of the most recently announced titles that had just came out. And needless to say, in just barely 2 weeks, we've had 3 different directs in total. I mean, you might as well say this was E3 0.1 if you want to go that far, because unfortunately it has already been stated that the physical E3 presentation will be canceled technically due to the fact that we're still under the COVID-19 restrictions still, but that does not stop everybody else from moving on as per usual. And it's kind of funny, I know some people probably thought that, 2021 would show how much effect 2020 has put on everyone. And I think it definitely shows to a certain degree. Nintendo definitely has had some restrictions in regards to it. They've had to change a lot of stuff. Sony has, Microsoft has. I mean, it has affected everybody to some form of degree. But that does not mean that stops everybody from doing anything else in genuine. So needless to say, there's a lot to go through. So let's first talk about the Nintendo Direct that first came out. So it came out literally 2 weeks ago, and it was pretty lengthy, It's 50 minutes long, and normally you would think to yourself, 50 minutes, that's nothing really, right? To be honest, depending on the presentation, there can be quite a bit of information that can be shown to us. And really, in all honesty, there was no determination of like what this was. This wasn't like a indie presentation. This wasn't like a one game type thing. This was just a regular Nintendo Direct, a actual Nintendo Direct, as most people would call it. Now, of course, naturally, there would be a lot of stuff that was put on here. There's a lot of different ports that's being released and stuff like that. The Ninja Gaiden series, surprisingly, Plants vs. Zombie, Modern Garden Warfare, and so on and so forth. But of those things that was interesting to me, there are a couple of ones that was definitely interesting. One of them being that of course, Mario Golf. Now, here's the thing. I'm not much of a sports fan. You know me. I'm not big into sports. But if there was one sports game that I did enjoy as a kid, was Mario Golf for the N64. And the funny thing is too, is that Delmar has constantly been mentioning of how much he would be excited for if they was to reveal another Mario Golf game. And it would make sense, but I had my doubts personally myself, but then again, it's hard to follow the trend of gaming and stuff, especially as fluctuating as it is. But as soon as this was revealed, I was like, oh, that's cool, just to see a new Mario Golf. I know Delmar was very excited about it, but what was more exciting wasn't just the game itself, but also, too, what all it was going to be. You have the fact that it has story mode, and even Mario Golf, or not Mario, Mario Tennis, All-Star Tennis, technically has story mode as well. So it's no surprise that Mario Golf would also have some form of story mode as well. However, though, there was another feature that they showed known as Speed Golf. This right here looks interesting. It looks pretty insane and wacky as to be expected. And if you have any idea of what Mario theme can be, then this one decided to take it up to the next level. You have the star power-up, the fire power-up, so on and so forth. So with all these different power-ups added on into Mario Golf, all about your speeding, not only are you trying to get to the major goal of, trying to get your ball into the hole itself with the least amount of points as possible in order to win the game, you also have to try to basically interfere with other players and stuff. And so this, personally, in my personal opinion, I think this will add into a wacky experience, and if nothing else, this would be very entertaining, to say the least. The next thing that they finally showed off was, of course, No More Heroes 3, and not only did they just show off gameplay of it, which looks insane, I love how it looks so far, but also, too, they also have an official release date. Yes, an official release date, not just a window of opportunity, an actual month, date, and this year, of course, being August of this year. So needless to say, that's pretty exciting to see. Now, of course, this year is supposed to be the 35th anniversary of Legend of Zelda. And so you would think that, there would be a large amount of content in regards to the Legend of Zelda series. Well, it wasn't in this Direct, although we did get 2 announcements in regards to Legend of Zelda. One of them is, of course, Age of Calamity, or in this case, a Season Pass. And I honestly didn't think that we was going to get DLC content for Age of Calamity, but at this case, if you can, then I guess at this rate you can, right? As to what they are, I'm not sure at the moment, and I have not gotten the game yet, so I don't know how relatable it could be in order to add on to it. But yeah, that's an interesting thing to see right there. But what's even more interesting, and it actually gives me hope for future game titles that we could see later on coming forward with the Nintendo Switch, and that is, of course, to see Skyward Sword HD. I honestly didn't think they were going to do Skyward Sword. I figured that one was too much of a... not to say that it was a terrible game, but there's too much controversy between fans of the series versus fans of this particular game. Some have enjoyed it, some hate it, some didn't care much for it, some gave it a pass. You know, there's just too many, it fluctuates too much. You know, you have some people that hated the motion controls, and I would probably be in that same category had it not been the fact that technically I didn't really play this game. So to say that I hate the motion controls, I don't know, but personally I hate motion controls entirely, so it's like any game that features motion controls at all, I tend to try to stay away from as best as possible. But that does not mean that this game should be avoided, because even though technically the HD release for the Switch technically has motion controls with the Joy-Cons, it can be enabled for button commands. And needless to say, when I first saw this, I was like, now we're getting somewhere interesting now. As to how well it's going to function, I'm not sure, but the fact that you don't have to worry about using the motion controls and stuff, that's actually pretty enjoyable right there. And using the analog stick for the sword movements and stuff, while I imagine in first perspective, it might be a little bit complex to understand, but after a while I imagine you get used to it, and needless to say, it would feel more comfortable actually. And so this right here tells me that if they were able to take a concept as complicated as Skyward Sword, they could probably take potential other titles that normally you would have to have the motion controls, but then you can reformat it and put it into the console itself. So I would not doubt in my mind that we could potentially see, like, for example, Star Fox Zero. As impossible that might sound for some people, I think they might be able to do something with it, you know? It's not too impossible to potentially see other games that would normally never work in the Nintendo Switch, much less controller base. If they were to work hard on it, they might actually do that. So, who knows, we might see Star Fox Zero, we might even see Epic Mickey being re-released. I actually would like that. I would like to see Epic Mickey. That was actually one of the very few motion control games that I did enjoy. Epic Mickey was definitely a good one. And really, I think we could potentially see others as well. Be interesting to see what they are, though. Now let's hop from Nintendo's side of things to Sony's way of things with their State of Play. And much like the past couple of State of Plays, it's kind of hit and miss, you know. You can't have a completely perfect direct, I imagine. There may be some cases here and there. In this case, there were some that was shown from last State of Play. What was the fact that they were announcing the PlayStation 5 and stuff and showcasing a number of games. Naturally, this one was more or less of an update feel of what those games are going to be within the next couple of months or so. But however, though, of those games, they did have some news that was interesting to me. One of them was, of course, Sifu. Now, Sifu is what I would imagine a brawler type game, but with an interesting mechanic. And that is the fact that when you die, you grow in age. Now, I'm not sure if that is 100% accurate, but judging by the way it looked in the trailer, that kind of gave me a familiarity of, like, Chronos Before the Ashes. If you don't know, I did a review on that one, and basically the biggest gameplay mechanic was the fact that every single time you die, you grew 1 year older. And now, I don't know what it is for this game, but the fact that he went from being a younger man to having, you know, somewhat of a goatee and stuff like that, and even later on in the trailer, he ended up having gray hair and stuff, it kind of tells me that for every defeat you have, you eventually grow older. So, I wonder if that is the mechanic, and if so, I actually kind of like it, because that's more or less of what you would call a, cosmetic display of growth. Now, what I mean by cosmetic display of growth is that, you know, we've seen games where they feature the concept of death. You know, you're always dying, you're always going to be defeated, and you're always going to fail. But, you know, they never change in appearance. In this game, in these games' cases, they're changing that formula up a little bit and giving it a cosmetic look to them. You know, it's like, hey, can you beat the game again, but this time with the least amount of deaths and stuff like that? And in all honesty, I kind of like it. Excuse me. It's a different way of doing the game itself. In my personal opinion, it's a unique one. And while it may be a small change, it's an appreciative one. It's kind of like what you would say its own challenge progression type thing, you know? Sort of like with the Pikmin series. In the Pikmin series, there is no time limit with the exception of the first one. But every single time you play the game again, you always challenge yourself in order to beat it faster or to get it in the most best way possible and stuff. And so I kind of appreciate this. And so I'm looking forward to Sifu. I think it's only for the PS5, but who's to say right now? As far as I know, it's only for the PS5 because so far, throughout the entire state of play, everything that they were announcing was only PS5. But aside from Sifu, they also gave some update in regards to other previously mentioned announcement titles. You know, one of these mentioned titles was, of course, Solar Ash. That one still looks interesting to me, although the gameplay style it's kind of hard for me to grasp into that idea. I know technically it's based on another gameplay style, or another game that had this gameplay style rather, but I don't care much for the gameplay perspective per se, but I do love the art style and the direction that this game is going towards. And so I'm hoping that this game will have like a demo per se, because then I could try it out and be like, okay, do I like the gameplay or not? Then again, I could always look up that other game and see if it has a demo, and if so, try that out and get an ideal perspective like, would this be a gameplay style that I would enjoy, or would it be a gameplay style that I could just, you know, avoid and all that stuff? But the only reason why I wanted to look into it was because Solar Ash is made by the same people who did Hyper Light Drifter. I love Hyper Light Drifter. That was a really interesting game in my personal opinion. And this one, it too looks interesting. I do love the color textures. I do love everything around it and stuff. The gameplay is the only thing that hinders me a little bit, so I definitely want to try out either this one or the previous, or another said game. I keep forgetting the name of it, so do forgive me. I'll post it up right here so you know what the game is. But I do want to try out one of the two demos, if they have one, and see if this is the gameplay that I might enjoy. It's hard to say right now, but for the time being, it's going to be on hold for the time being. But another announcement, aside from the fact that they also talked about Abe's Exody, it involves Abe anyway. That one still looks interesting to me. It's not on my high tier list of games that I'm wanting to get, but it's definitely an interest for most. Kenna Bridge of Spirits. It was originally stated to be released in March of this year. Unfortunately, it has been pushed back. It has been pushed back again to August. So, might be a while before I get to play that one. Aside from those updates, we have another update. And this one's actually Final Fantasy VII Remake related. For those that don't know, Final Fantasy VII Remake came out last year for PS4, and I believe sometime this year it's supposed to come out for PC. Now here's the thing, technically Final Fantasy VII Remake is going to be receiving a 4K Enhanced Edition for those who migrate the game from either physical or digital, depending on which one you own, to the PS5. And this makes sense. If you didn't think they were going to do something like that, you're kind of foolish, because this is Final Fantasy VII Remake. Of course Square is going to give it the ultimate treatment that it can possible, you know? You think about it, Final Fantasy VII is what you would call Square Enix saving grace when it comes to marketing strategy. If they failed in some aspects in some previous areas, they know Final Fantasy VII will definitely save the day, and especially now because of the remake. And I know some people will have different beliefs on this ideal alone, but when you consider how much it has sold so far alone on the PlayStation 4, I believe on its first month it already sold over 1 million copies. Which is insane when you think about it, you know, and this isn't even considering either physical or digital. This is like both. And it's pretty insane, considering the fact that technically last year, we was in a COVID situation. So it's like, it's pretty impressive. But aside from the 4K Enhanced Edition that's going to be added onto it, we're also going to be getting a DLC added on into Final Fantasy VII Remake. This DLC involves Yuffie, which is interesting, and I may be wrong, but I'm theorizing that this particular story chapter DLC takes place between, during the time that Cloud and Aerith are hanging out down in the slums and stuff. I imagine it is taking that place because you see Barrett and Tifa talking to, Briggs. They were talking to him saying that they lost Cloud, and that what gives me the idea that technically this takes place during that segment, especially considering the fact that the slums in Sector 7 is still standing to some degree. So it's like, that's probably where it takes place, but to know that we're going to have an extra chapter to involve ourselves with Yuffie no less, it's definitely going to be fun to see that. Despite that, there's a couple things that I have to say that kind of not so much irks me, but so much that makes me go, huh? So the first thing that they showed off during that trailer is that towards the end of that particular part alone, they showed off Vyse. Now, if you don't know who Vyse is, technically he is a main villain in Dres of Cerberus. And you fight him towards the end of Dres of Cerberus. And to see him show up in the Yuffie episode and stuff like that, I don't know if he's like a main villain that you have to fight during that segment, or if he's like a, what you would call a VR boss. It'd be interesting if he was a VR boss, because they kind of show that background and stuff. But they also showed some of the enemies, and those enemies do appear in Dres of Cerberus, so that kind of gave me the idea that technically they might fight Vyse during that segment. I don't know, but it's going to be interesting nonetheless to see where it goes from here on out. But that was interesting. It's like, that's Vyse. What's Vyse doing there? So I'm interested to see where this is going to go. However, though, I have a little problem with this, and that depends on if it's true or not, because everyone else, it's like a beeline middle almost, but the more I read it, the more it seems more and more likely that this is only going to be available for the PlayStation 5, which is odd, I thought. This is very odd. Now, here's the reason why I say it's odd. You know, for the most part, every other game, except for, like, say, Demon's Souls and one or two other exceptions, every other game that has been released for the PlayStation 5 is also going to be released for the PlayStation 4 as well. And here's what's weird. This is DLC content only. DLC content only. You know, the whole 4K Enhanced Edition saying that comes free if you have had Final Fantasy VII Remake available physically or digitally, and thus porting it onto the PS5. That makes sense. However, though, the DLC for the Yuffie episodes, those are only available through the PlayStation 5 to be downloaded. I thought that was a very weird decision, I thought. Because technically, you know, this was solely released for the PlayStation 4, and I would understand if this was released for both PS4 and PS5. Completely understandable, I completely understand it. What doesn't make sense to me, though, is why only PS5? It makes no sense, especially when you consider the fact that there's a bunch of other gamers who still haven't got their PS5. And I know people want to get the PS5, but here's the thing. Where can you get it? And as far as I know, there's no way to do like a pre-order option. There's no like being put on a waiting list or whatever. I've checked on both the Sony website, Walmart, Amazon. There's no way you can pre-order this thing, okay? This is almost an impossible find right now. And I've even told this to everybody else, but everybody else seems to have a different opinion, which is weird in my personal opinion. You know, it's like I told everybody, I said, not everybody's able to get a PlayStation 5, even if they wanted to. Because really, the only way you're going to get it this time around is if you buy it from a scalper, which would be completely ludicrous if you were to do that. You know, you should not submit to that. That's more or less giving money to the scalpers rather than giving it to Sony, who made the product alone. You know, because the scalpers are going to be charging it at least a good $200-300 more, if not double the price than what you would normally pay at retail. You know, and it's like, you know, if I want to pay for it, I'm going to pay it the way it should be paid, which is through retail. I'm not going to go through a scalper who was more or less scummy enough to go out of his way to purchase them. And instead, people are just going to go for the scalpers, I bet. And it's like, and people were like, the weird thing is, people were like, but Square Enix made a good strategy to release the DLC only for PS5 users, so it can encourage the sale for PS5. And I said to them, and I quote, well, how can you encourage a sale if you don't have it in stock? You see the point that I'm giving at, but no one else cares. It's like, hey, get a PS5. And it's like, there's no PS5 on the shelf! That's the point that I'm trying to say, and it's like, it's going over people's heads for some reason, and it's like, do people not understand any of the things that I'm saying? Maybe it's just me, but it's like, if you're going to sell something, make certain people have it first. And trust me whenever I say this, the PS5 is nowhere to be found right now. They still have time, technically, to give an update on this, and hopefully we might get an update feedback saying that, okay, it's not just PS5, but it's also going to be available for PS4 as well. Because every single time I look at the description in the official website and everything like that, it keeps saying, kind of like a back and forth thing, and it's like, PS4 users of Final Fantasy VII Remake will be able to redeem the DLC for the PS5 version, and it's like, but that doesn't answer the question correctly. Is it for PS4 and PS5, or just PS5? Just say it's only for PS5. Don't give it a cryptic message already. That's confusing enough as it is. However, aside from that though, we also have some more update feedback from Square Enix themselves. After the state of play that was talked about, Square Enix decided to do 2 other announcements through Twitter and stuff. One of them was, of course, Final Fantasy VII Remake First Soldier. And that one is going to be a mobile phone game only. But the thing is that that gameplay style kind of reminds me of Final Fantasy 15 Comrades. Now that wasn't a bad thing, just wasn't interesting enough to me. I imagine it might go into detail and stuff, but in all honesty, I imagine that would get future updates as well. But if not, Square is kind of missing out on potential money that they could be missing out, because not everyone's wanting to have a mobile experience. However, there was another announcement that was added, and this one has more people talking about it rather than First Soldier. First Soldier has like a small little audience attracted to, but this next announcement that they gave out was even more attractive, being that of Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis. Now, here's what's interesting about this one. This one features a different graphical look to Final Fantasy VII Remake, as to opposed to, like, you know, how Final Fantasy VII Remake looks now. This one's kind of going backwards to, like, how it looks in Final Fantasy VII, but giving it a update remake look to it. And it's like, it looks really good in all honesty. In fact, I think a lot of people actually wanted it to look like this, as to opposed to what Final Fantasy VII Remake went. It already looks interesting in terms of the gameplay, because while overhead, it's got this overhead gameplay look to it, in combat, it looks more of the 3D aspects, but in turn-based combat. So it definitely looks interesting right there. But what's even more so is that they've announced it, that technically, the story of Final Fantasy VII will be complete in this one, where it not just covers the main game, but it also covers Crisis Core, Before Crisis, Advent Children, and Dres of Cerberus, which is kind of insane when you look at all of that. That's like, oh my gosh. But it's only available through mobile only. So that right there still bothers me that it's only mobile. But a lot of people are hoping, and I think it will. It's supposed to release in 2022, and I imagine they've got plenty of time between now and 2022 in order to update this to where not only is it mobile only, but it will also be available for Switch as well. In fact, really, the way it looks like it would work perfectly for Switch. And the fact that it's not going to be ported for Switch is a shocker, because technically this game is only exclusive for PS4 now. In a month from now, it will also be available for PC. And if I won't doubt in my mind that this will get a future update where Xbox One users, or Xbox Series X, depending on who you look at, will be able to play this as well. So I won't doubt it that they'll also convert Ever Crisis for Switch. If they don't, it's a very, very missed opportunity to get a lot more profit in, especially when you think about how many people actually want this on Switch. Like, seriously, the second this got announced, everyone was like, mobile only? This looks like it should be for the Switch too. And it's like, yeah, it should be. Now, surprisingly, we have one more Direct that was being talked about, and that is, of course, the Pokemon Direct. As you know, this year is another anniversary, being that of Pokemon 25th anniversary. I cannot believe that just went through my lips. 25 years. Daggum. Wow. But anyway, so Pokemon 25th anniversary is being talked about in this Direct. And of course, they had a lot of announcements to give off. One of them was, of course, an update in regards to Pokemon Snap. Still very interested in it. You know, there's a lot of cool stuff that can be said with Pokemon Snap. Definitely looking forward to this one. But there was a couple of new announcements that was released in regards to the Pokemon Direct as well. One of them, which surprisingly was a rumor for a long while, and it's now confirmed, a remake of Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, being that a Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Pokemon Shining Pearl. Needless to say, I'm kind of surprised. I honestly didn't think that we was going to see a remake, because the last time they talked about something like this in terms of a rumor, it was Pokemon Star, which was supposed to be like a third entry title for Pokemon Sun and Moon, but it was going to be released for the Switch. That never happened, and instead we ended up with Sword and Shield. In this case, it's an actual remake of Diamond and Pearl, and it looks interesting. It looks like it'd be a good time. But aside from that, there was another announcement, and unfortunately, I have not been able to get myself out of that hype train since I've saw it. And needless to say, it's kind of bad for me to talk about this, considering there's a number of people who love and hate it. And it's like, why would you hate it? And it's like, okay, I can understand some of the examples that they give, but at least give it a moment, you know? It still has like a year before it actually gets concrete release. But Pokemon Legends Arceus, I love how this looks, okay? I'm just gonna say that right now. I love how this looks. I love the concept. I love the ideal. The gameplay fascinates me because you have a wider range of like gameplay, you know, instead of just walking around, riding a bike or whatever, you're actually walking, running, but you're also dodge rolling. And this kind of tells me that there's going to be more implementation in terms of like hunting down and catching Pokemons in this game. And it's going to be interesting to see because you're not just catching them through battle, you're catching them out in the wild. So you're going through back and forth doing a mixture of how the gameplay is going to be. You know, you see a segment in which where the trainer throws the ball while hiding in grass and stuff and catches it. And then you have segments in which where you're actually battling them alongside your Pokemon. And this is interesting in my personal opinion. I know some people will argue saying they would have loved to have actually controlled the Pokemon and actually battle them. But in my personal opinion, Pokemon is always going to have that turn-based feel. And there's nothing wrong with keeping the turn-based. But I do like the segment that they're going with. I do like how it looks. And I love the atmosphere. Oh my gosh. It's got like this pre-feudal Japan look to it. And I love it. I love how it looks. And even the Pokeball design alone kind of reminds me of whenever Pokemon Forever. I haven't seen it in forever. I wanted to make that joke so badly. Anyway, Pokemon Forever, if you don't know, technically in the film, there's a character who comes from a different time period and ends up teaming up with Ash and stuff in order to get Celebi and save it. What's interesting though is that Pokeball is a different style of a Pokeball. Instead of being like, you know, that little button thing that opens up the ball and stuff like that, it's actually a dial in which where it releases the Pokemon. In this case, it's involving Steam. And I imagine it's got like a little latch thing to it, and I love how it looks so far. Again, everything about it has me excited. I love how it looks, and I cannot wait for more information to come out for this because I feel hyped for this. I feel excited. The more I think about it, the more and more I'm like, yeah, this could work. This can definitely work. It's just people are being negative about it to some degree, and in the opposite end, you have people who are overhyping this, and that's not as good either. That's almost as bad, and I need to calm down, but I can't help it, because if this ends up being what I think it is, this would be like the dream Pokemon game, you know? The dream Pokemon game where you're free to roam around the open world. Open world! You know, this isn't like a map up area or whatever. This is a free roam area, which is something that everyone actually arguably liked it in Pokemon Sword and Shield. They liked it, the open world concept. They just didn't like how blocked off from everywhere else compared to the open world. It didn't seem flawlessly open. It was kind of like a blocked up open world map and then blocked off different city portions, which in all honesty doesn't bother me compared to most people. Most people are bothered by that. It doesn't bother me as much as most people. I understand one is seamlessly open, but in all honesty, if this is released for the Switch, it kind of makes sense for why they would do stuff like that. And I understand the whole, like, the Pokemon don't look right. I understand, but here's the thing. They're Pokemon. They're going to keep that anime style to a certain degree. And if you're anyone who is familiar with games like, for example, Persona 5 or whatever, even the demons don't fully animate the way they should. I mean, I understand that they're limited, and, you know, for people who have, like, 4K resolutions, it can definitely look jarring. But it doesn't look that awful bad. If nothing else, if you can appreciate the Pokemon for what they are right now, if you're okay with Pokemons right now in their current state, then in all honesty, there's nothing that bad. It can be worse. Trust me, it can be worse. But the direction that it's going, I think it can work. And we just gotta give it time. Well, anyway, guys, that's gonna be it for this video. Needless to say, there's been a lot of announcements that have come out within these past few weeks, and keep in mind we are officially in March, so it won't be long before we might get some more updates. Keep in mind we still don't know anything about Shin Megami Tensei 3 HD, because technically it's supposed to be coming out in spring. We don't know when precisely in spring, but in America alone it's supposed to come out in spring, so hopefully there's a future announcement in regards to that. Then, of course, you have the fact that Elden Ring, even though there's being talk about unfortunate talks going on, we have not gotten confirmation, 100% confirmation, mind you, from the official team, much less from the official director. So it's like, right now, Elden Ring is kind of held back too as well. And there's even a number of titles that are still being announced that technically was announced. We haven't received any new updates yet, but you know, I imagine they won't come out until along with the other months as well. So hopefully we'll receive more details in the future. So anyway, guys, let me know in the comments below. Of these 3 directs that we've had, which ones are you most hyped about the most? Which ones are you the most excited for? Trust me, whenever I say this, there was a lot to talk about in these past 3 directs, and I figured I'd just combine them all into one video. So needless to say, thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you in the next video. This is BlackCross signing off. Catch you guys later.